Thank you for joining us at Community on Demand. Today's message is presented by Dan Greer. Dan holds a doctorate from Grace School of Theology and is the senior pastor here at Community Church. This message was recorded during a live Sunday morning service at Community. Let's listen in as Dan begins.
Well, the news of the week was Easter Sunday with the Pope, and then his death and his funeral, and all the dignitaries going to the Vatican. That was really kind of the whole week's news thing this week, wasn't it? Pope Francis. There at the Vatican. You know, he died on Monday, as you all know, April the 21st, 88 years of age, and according to reports, had been in a hospital for 38 days, 38 weeks, with pneumonia. I feel his pain. I was there on Easter Sunday. He took his last ride in the Pope Mobile, met with the Vice President of the United States, delivered the Easter blessing. I went to bed that night. Next morning, suffered a massive stroke. Went into a coma and had irreversible cardiac failure and passed away there on Easter Monday. He became the head of the Catholic Church on March the 13th, 2013, served for 12 years, was the 266th Pope. Inquiring minds want to know. Oh. And, according to the National Catholic Reporter, he left a legacy. His legacy was his advocacy against poverty, for social justice, for climate awareness, and for peace. A month ago, many of you know that we lost Dr. Kenny Hodges. Passed away at 72 years old after a long battle with cancer. I'd like to read you his legacy. He was in pastoral ministry for over 30 years at the Emmanuel Baptist Church there in Starkville, Mississippi. Was the worship pastor and elder here at Community for the past 4 years. Board member of Grace, Free Grace Alliance, director of ministries, had a doctor of ministries there from Grace, author of Foundations of Grace. Many of us are studying that in our Bible studies, our small groups, adjunct professor at the college, founder of Two Circles Ministry, and longtime counselor and teacher at the Ichthus Youth Camp. In fact, he wrote a dissertation, I think it was a master's dissertation on building Free Grace youth camps, where countless teens have come to know Christ as their Savior. What a legacy, isn't it? I bet you if the Pope or Kenny were able to stand on the pulpit here today, that they might say something like this to give a testimony. They might say something like, folks, life is but a vapor, but our legacy lasts forever. Currently, I'm mentoring a group of seminary students who are about to get their MDivs next month as they graduate. So I meet twice a month with them on Tuesday evening, and I'm really working with them on leadership development. And the focus is finishing well and leaving a legacy. The older I get, the more and more important it is to me to finish well and leave a legacy. Leave a legacy for my students, my children, my grandchildren, my co-laborers when I'm gone, to leave something that will carry on in their lives forever. The problem is The problem is that we live in a world that screams, no, live life. Grab all the, remember the slits commercial? Some of you say, what slits? I keep forgetting how old I am, you know. It's a beer. It's a beer, guys. And the Slits beer commercial used to say, you only go around once in life, so grab all the gusto you can. You know, just get everything you can out of life. You know, while Jesus has given us the Great Commission to preach the gospel to every creature and the great commandment of loving God and people, the world is teaching us, rather than the Great Commission or the Great Commandment, they're teaching us to be greedy consumers. Don't go to church to give. Go to get. Go to gripe. Go to groan. Go to grumble. Go to grab as much as you can, and we become consumers like the rest of the world. And what happens, rather than leaving a legacy, we end up losing or wasting our lives on frivolous things. A few days after the resurrection, we talked about the resurrection Easter. We had a great time celebrating the resurrection last week. But a few days after the resurrection, the Apostle Peter finds himself at a crossroads in life. When you look at the life of Peter, he obviously has the gift of leadership, wouldn't you say? I mean, he's always out front telling everybody telling Jesus what to do, you know. He's always trying to lead. But a few days after the resurrection, I mean, Jesus was raised, and he's kind of at a crossroads. Let me set this up, okay? He failed miserably before the resurrection. He denied the Lord 3 times. He cut off a guy's ear. I like that. I mean, I think he was swinging for his head. The guy ducked and he got his ear. I think that's what happened. He tried to keep Jesus from going to the cross. He fled the scene when the crowd came to arrest him, and then he sees the resurrected Christ twice, and then several days later we come to John chapter 21. And there Peter and 6 other disciples are about 70 miles north of Jerusalem in Galilee, and Peter's going to make a decision. Do I leave a legacy for others to follow, or do I leave the Lord and do my own thing? And so when we come to John chapter 21, there's a story there. There's kind of like 3 stories there, all rolled into one. We're going to try to get through it today. It's a story about fishing. It's a story about feeding. And it's a story about following. Let's jump into the story real quick, okay? This is kind of a cool story. This is after the resurrection. So let's jump into it here. It's a story about fishing. Do you remember the story? There in John chapter 21. We'll pick it up in verse 3 there. Simon Peter said to them, now he's up there with about 6 other guys, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we're going with you. They were out and immediately got in the boat, and that night they caught nothing. You know the story about Peter and his brother Andrew and his 2 cousins, James and John. They were in the fishing business, probably partners, probably independent businessmen there, and they weren't poor. They own fishing boats. I don't own a fishing boat, you know. But this is after the resurrection, and after the resurrection, they don't have any particular direction, any particular mission. Of course, they're trying to figure out what to do, and the most logical thing to do is, we're fishermen. Let's go fishing. Let's continue reading, verse 4. And when the morning had come, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to them, children, do you have any food? And they answered, no. And he said to them, cast the net on the other side of the boat, and you will find some. And so they cast, and now they were not able to pull, to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. It's kind of a deja vu moment for Peter. If you go back to Luke chapter 5 and verse number 5, you'll find kind of the same scenario. This is the beginning of the ministry. Jesus is calling his disciples, and he gets in the boat with Peter and Andrew. He just cast out a little bit and throw the net on the other side, and they pulled in fish. A lot of fish at the beginning of the ministry, a lot of fish now. So you know, he's thinking, maybe this is the new normal. Maybe this is the kingdom. Maybe in the kingdom, I'm not saying he's thinking this, maybe he's thinking this. Maybe what's going to happen now with the resurrected Christ, he's going to be in charge, and I'm going to be a rich man. I'm going to be a rich fisherman because look at all these fish I can get in here. That's kind of what I read into the passage. But do you remember when back in Luke chapter 5, and what Jesus told him after he caught all the fish, is he said, hereafter you will be fishers of men, not fishers of fish. But Peter's liking this fisher of fish. I mean, he caught a lot of fish here. Let me try to dig into this just a little bit. It said if you read the passage there in verse 11, it says he had 153 great fish. Most likely this is a family mini fish, part of the carp family. They call it Peter's fish. These fish can get anywhere from 10 to 23, 24 pounds a piece. And if you were to go and look up on the market today, this particular fish on the fresh market today, you would see that it's about 24 pounds, about $24 per pound there of the fresh market. And if you do some calculating, and you look over there at that pile of fish is worth $55,333. Quite a catch. And like I said, maybe that's what his thought was, is this is the new normal. Things are going to be good. The Lord's going to restore the earth. I'm a fisherman. We're going to catch fish. I'm going to get rich. It's a story about fish. Do you see it's a story about fish? But then it's also a story about fish, about feeding. Let's go on and read some more there in verse 15. They come and they pull all the fish to the shore. Then as soon as they had come to land, and they saw a fire of coals and fish laid on it and bread, and Jesus said, bring some of the fish which you've just caught. Okay, this is kind of going along. The resurrected Jesus is cooking. He's serving. He's eating breakfast. These 7 disciples, he's serving these disciples. And so that kind of gives us a little bit of a clue about what our resurrected bodies will be like. We'll be able to fish. Jesus somehow got there. And they'll be gloriously extraterrestrial, but they'll be similar in so much that we'll be able to eat. I mean, pick that up there, just FYI. Let's keep reading. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. And he said to him, feed my sheep, feed my lambs. And then he said to him a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And he said, yes, Lord. You know I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. And he said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. There's a lot of stuff going on in this dialogue here. You probably already heard 3 or 4 sermons on it. But there's a ton of stuff going on here. First of all, did you notice that Jesus asked him 3 times? Is that kind of, maybe that kind of correlates to Peter denying him 3 times back at Caiaphas' house. Who knows? The word love. Have any of you kind of done a word study on the word love here? The first couple of times Jesus used the word agapeo, And when Peter answers, he uses the word phileo. And so the last time what Jesus does is he uses the word, okay, phileo. What do you mean by that? Well, what Jesus is saying is, Peter, do you love me unconditionally, sacrificially, agapeo? That's what that word is. The old King James Version over in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 calls it charity, a love you give away. Well, maybe not expecting anything in return. But Peter does not say, yes, Lord, I agapeo you. I phileo. Lord, I love you with my heart. A feeling, type of love. See the difference? And so he does that a couple of times. Then Jesus kind of says, okay, Peter, do you phileo me? And of course, Peter, I kind of respect Peter, because what he's not doing here is he's not gaslighting Jesus. He's saying, you know, all things, I'm not quite there yet, but I do love you, Lord. I'm struggling at a crossroads right now. So there's, you've got all that going on. And did you notice, sometimes when Peter answers, he says, okay, feed my sheep. Tend my sheep. Feed my lambs. So what he's telling him is, you've got something to do here. You need to feed my sheep. So what is going on here? Oh, and did you notice it said, love us? Do you love me more than these? What are the these? Have you ever wondered what the these are? Or is he pointing to the 6 disciples? Are these disciples? Is he pointing to the boat and the fishing gear, saying the boat and the fishing gear? Or is he looking at $55,330 worth of fish laying out there? And he knows Peter might be thinking, man, if we don't hurry up and get this conversation done, those fish are going to spoil. I need to get them to market and hurry up. And, I can do a lot of ministry with $55,330. I mean, what is he thinking there? Jesus is feeding breakfast to Peter, telling Peter to feed and tend his sheep, and Peter is thinking about getting the fish to market so that it can feed people and he can make some money. All of this is going on there. You see, I mean, we got fishing, we got feeding, and then it's a story about following. Look at verse 17. And Jesus said to him, most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked wherever you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. And it says, this he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. Jesus does a little riddle here, a little riddle to make you think. He said, Peter, you did about what you wanted to when you were younger, but there's going to come a day when you're older, and they're going to stretch you out and take you where you don't want to go. And Peter got the riddle. I mean, later on, he'll look over and he'll say, what about John? What about John? What about John? He said, it's not any of your business. And what Jesus is trying to do here, he's trying to say, Peter, you're at crossroads. Yeah, you can quit. You can go back. You can sell the fish. You can do that thing. And you can lose and waste. Or you can follow me and it's going to cost you. And you can leave a legacy. And he did. He left a legacy of becoming fishers of men, feeder of sheep, and followers of Jesus. Peter became all three. And today, here we are, April the 27th, 2025, 2,000 years later, and we're still looking at Peter's legacy. Isn't that something? He left it then, and we see it today because he followed Jesus. Do you realize that we're all called into ministry? Every one of us sitting here today. Some of us are called for full-time vocational ministry, while some of us are called into fully focused volunteer lay ministry. And all of us come to the point that Peter did after the resurrection, and we're tempted and we're drawn to quit. Quit the ministry. Go after other things. As Peter was facing that crossroads. So when we begin to come to these crossroads in life, there are three things that Peter went through that will help him to leave a legacy, not only for the Jewish people, but for us. And I want to go through those. Number one, let me give three phases. Phase number one, I call, is our response to our calling. The response to our calling. I want to go all the way back to Matthew chapter 4, when Jesus, this is part of the synoptics where Jesus is calling his disciples. And it says, and Jesus, walking on the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting their nets into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. They immediately left their nets and followed him. Now again, let me say this. Peter wasn't a poor guy. He was a middle class, maybe an upper middle class, independent, small business owner, trying to make a living for his family. At a time when things were as difficult as they are here in the United States today, there was political corruption, religious hypocrisy, there were high taxes, there were oppression. Everything that you can think of that we're going through, he went through. And on at least two occasions, there in Luke chapter 5 and John 21, we will see that Peter's out working all night. Tired, you're working so hard. He worked all night fishing, caught nothing. And so the thing is, the fishing industry was hard, but it paid off. And so here Jesus is walking along the seashore, and here's this dedicated, hardworking, sacrificial individual that cares about his family. He's a good Jewish guy, reads the scripture, cares about his community, goes to the synagogue, takes care of his mother-in-law, and Jesus calls him and his brother Andrew to join him on his team to change the world. Peter, we're going to do something bigger than just saving your family and your people. We're going to change the world. You'll just follow me. In Matthew chapter 20 and verse 16, he goes through several things, and then he comes to this one point, and I want to hit you with this. He says, so the last shall be first, and the first shall be last, for many are called, but few are chosen. You say, well, what does that mean? That means, what I said a moment ago, is that God is calling us. Christ is calling us. The Holy Spirit is wooing us. Some of us vocationally full-time, some of us focused, volunteer, fully focused. But he's calling us. And it's on us to respond. If we don't respond to his call, if we grieve the Holy Spirit, if we push back, say, I don't have time, I've got to do this, then what happens if he's calling us, but he can't choose us if we don't respond. You got to respond to the call before he can choose us. He can't choose us to do work if we refuse to respond. As I'm teaching these students, one of the things about our calling is we oftentimes receive our calling into ministry, whether it be lay ministry, volunteer, whether it be vocational ministry, full-time. We usually receive our calling somewhere between 18 and 30 years old. That's when God begins to really work on us. He wants the best. He doesn't want the leftovers. That doesn't mean that he doesn't call people later in life. He does call people later in life, especially if we've been through things. But generally speaking, this is when we receive that call. And so we got to respond. If we say, no, Lord, wait, Lord, I can't do something else, Lord, we may waste time. We may lose life. We may miss his choosing. Here's the second phase. Is to release our contribution. We go all the way to Acts. Jesus is still on the earth in Acts. He's issued the Great Commission, and it says in those days Peter stood up in the midst of the disciples. Altogether, the number being of names was about 120. He's got about 120, and he stands up, and what Peter has been in a discipleship relationship with Christ for about 3.5 years. And during that 3.5 years, he made a lot of contribution. I mean, think about it. He walked on water. That's pretty cool. He confessed Jesus is Christ, a great confession. Who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am? You are the Christ, the living Son of God. That's his great confession that we go to all the time. And here he's leading and choosing Matthias, and later on he'll preach at Pentecost. In Acts chapter 2, it says, but Peter, standing up with the 11, raised his voice and said to them, men of Judea, and all who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you and heed my words. This is what was spoken by the prophet Joel there in chapter 2. So, I love old Peter. You know why? He made a lot of mistakes. I mean, a lot. He tried to prevent Jesus from going to the cross. Like I said, he cut off a guy's ear. He fell asleep during the most important prayer meeting of his life in the Garden of Gethsemane. He falls asleep. He denied the Lord 3 times. One time, the Lord looked at him and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. I think he said it with that tone. Go to Satan. He made a lot of mistakes. What I really love about Peter is even though he made mistakes, by the way, the only people that don't make mistakes are people that are not doing anything. If you're doing something, you're making mistakes. You're doing a lot, you're making a lot of mistakes. And the thing about Peter is that as imperfect as he was a contributor, not a consumer, even though he made a lot of mistakes. We're all going to do that. One mistake we can't make is becoming a Christian consumer. And I'm afraid that's one of the problems that we have here in the United States of America today, is that a majority of Christians have become consumers instead of contributors. A lot of Christians say, what you got for me, Dan? What are you going to give me today? Well, I think I'll stay home. What you got? What you got? What you got? So God has called us to be givers, not greedy. So we come to serve, not to sit. Okay? And we begin to realize this when we're about 40 years old. About 40 to 50, somewhere in there. And it dawns on us that we've got to start contributing. We've got to be putting something in to the ministry, and that's kind of the sweet spot there as we contribute. So we talk about the phases. Phase 1 is our calling. Phase 2 is our contribution to ministry. Phase 3 is to recognize our convergence. In Galatians chapter 2, Paul is going to go back and say something about Peter. I want to read it to you. The gospel for the uncircumcised, when we see the word uncircumcised, that just means anyone that's not a Jew. Circumcised means anyone that's a Jew, okay? The gospel for the uncircumcised has been committed to me. That's Paul talking. And the gospel for the circumcised to Peter. For he who worked effectively in Peter for the apostleship to the circumcised also worked effectively in me toward the Gentiles. You see what Paul's doing here? Paul is giving us Peter's legacy. He said his ministry was to the Jews, while Paul's was to the Gentiles. And when Peter recognizes that, he goes all in. Look, when we go to 1 Peter chapter 1, he wrote 1 Peter and 2 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 1, he writes, and this is after the Jewish people have been scattered because of persecution there in Jerusalem. He writes to the pilgrims of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia, grace to you and peace be multiplied. What they've done is they've escaped up into the Turkey, Ukrainian area, and they're dispersing up there, and Peter is writing to them, continuing to minister to them. Countless Jewish people became Christ followers in Israel, in the dispersion, in modern Turkey, as Jewish immigrants because of persecution, and his legacy continues today. His legacy continues in so much that the Catholics want to claim him as their pope, as the first one. And maybe he was, I don't know. I'm not going to go there. But the thing that we see here is here in John chapter 21 on the shores of Galilee, when Jesus said, "Follow me," there's a lot of things that Peter could have said. He could have said, "Jesus, I am tired. I have worked all night. And then I pulled all of these fish. I am tired. I need to rest. I'm going to go home." He could have said, "Hey, okay, but do you see that $55,330 worth of fish there? They're going to spoil if somebody doesn't get them to market. I've got to get them to market, and then I'll get back with you later." Could have said that. He could have said, "I'll do about anything for you, but stretching my hands out and getting carried, that sounds kind of like what happened to you." A lot of things he could say. But in all of his calling, his contributions that he made, his confusion that he was going through, his mistakes, they all begin coming together and making sense as he puts them all, as they converge to come upon him as he prepares to make a commitment to leave a legacy for his kids, his community, his country. And community churches, we're looking at it today. What a legacy. We're no different than Peter. All of us have been called into ministry, every one of us. He wants to choose us. He wants us to respond to the call. Say, "Yes, Lord. You died on the cross. You were resurrected. We did Easter Sunday. Yes, Lord. I want to follow you. Well, it may not turn out too good. That's okay. I want to follow you." We all have contributions to make. I look out there today and I just see all kinds of talent and just so much capacity in this room. Even though we're down today, what a group of people that could change the community and change the world right here today. It all comes together as we begin to see how God brings things together, brings us together, brings us so that we can have a legacy of influence and impact and guidance and direction for the kids, for people that are struggling, for people that are out there that do not know which way to go. We can have an impact, especially those that are 60 and older. You get me there? Ignatius Jane Paderewski was a famous piano. You know Mozart, but you probably don't know this guy. very, very famous pianist. And he was scheduled to perform at a concert hall here in the United States. It was a high society thing. I mean, cost a lot of money to get in. Highfalutin people there. They walked in their tuxedos. They sat down. They were all so proper and everything. And there was this one lady whose son, she wanted, 9 years old, and she thought if she would sacrifice, buy the tickets, come to the concert, that her son might see the maestro, and it might encourage him to practice his piano and make something of himself as a musician. And so the lady came in with her little son sitting there, and she saw people around her, and she was also excited. And when she turned over here to talk to the lady behind her on this side, whom she had recognized, the little 9-year-old boy slipped out of the seat, went down the aisle, and was drawn to that grand Steinway piano on the stage. And he walked up on the stage, and he sat down on the piano stool. His feet wouldn't even touch the ground. And he sat up straight, and he began to play ding, 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 ding. You know what? Chopsticks. And out in the crowd, people said, "Get that kid off of the stage. This is an outrage. Whose child is that?" And the crowd began to shout and stir. And the maestro behind the curtain saw what was going on. And he grabbed his tuxedo coat, threw it on very quickly, ran out behind the boy, and put his arms on both sides and began playing the counter melody to Chopsticks. And the whole time he was playing, he was whispering in the boy's ear, "Don't quit, don't quit, don't quit." At the end of the song, they both stood and bowed and walked off the stage. God is calling. He's calling us to contribute. He's allowing us to make mistakes. He's bringing things into our life that we don't want to be there. He's saying, follow. Be fishers of men. Be feeders of sheep. Be followers of Christ. Don't quit. Don't quit. I'm here playing the counter melody. Don't quit. Don't quit. Don't quit.
On behalf of Pastor Dan and the folks at Community, thank you for joining us today at Community on Demand. Feel free to share this link with others, and please know you are always welcome to be our guest during a live service any Sunday morning at our campus in The Woodlands, Texas. For more information, just click on the link, www.cbcwoodlands.org. I hope you will again join us at Community on Demand.